All right. Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of Dick Proles, where we do the most with what little we have. And tonight we have a returning friend of the show. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Zach. I'm a moron on the internet, and I play video games on a hell site called twitch.tv.org.
Yeah, you certainly do.
Not very well, but I do it.
And you are going to be joining me today to help further the idea of and the discussion on a wonderful TV program that came out, goodness, like 13 years ago, almost 14 years ago, called Generation Kill. And I was meaning to save this for when we were recording, but the real kick in the pants for doing this, take a wild guess why I was like, hey Zach, you want to do this?
I'm guessing the Taliban yoinking into Afghanistan and absolutely undoing whatever bullshit we've been doing for like the last 16 years or 20 years. 20 years. And
No.
undoing it in the span of like 2 months?
No, actually. And this episode is dedicated to the
brave fighters of the Mujahideen. God.
Amazing, bless.
No, what was the inspo?
It was Donald Rumsfeld dying.
Oh, that's right. He did kick the bucket.
Yeah, like almost a month ago.
God bless.
So, we're here to discuss a TV show that was put out by HBO just over a decade ago called Generation Kill, and it was a TV adaptation, a miniseries adaptation of a book by the same name by Evan Wright. And unfortunately, I didn't really get to read a whole lot of it, but this is more about the TV show. And the book was about this embedded reporter for Rolling Stone who joined up with the 1st Recon Battalion, Bravo Company, and he was there when the invasion in 2003 happened, and he reported on what he saw and wrote apparently a really good book about it. And
yeah, well, I was going to say it's important to note too with the production of the show, there's stuff in the show that wasn't in the book, in part because the production of the show had heavy involvement of not just Evan, but also I think 2 or 3 members of 1st Recon that were actually there who also actually played themselves in the show.
Yeah, Rudy Reyes played himself. There was
I can't remember the other guy.
Eric Coker, Kocher.
Right.
I don't remember if he played himself exactly, but he was on the show.
And they trained up the actors to so that they could accurately kind of get the physicality of it.
Yeah, they made these guys into Marines pretty much.
And, at least enough for a TV show.
Yeah.
Without all the brainwashing.
Yeah. They got to keep their brains. They weren't entirely jarheads by the end of the show.
Right.
Though you might be mistaken to believe that they were because of the way that they took themselves. And I guess, yeah, let's get right into it. But so first off, something that I wanted to do with this episode in particular and the digestion of Generation Kill is like all the different things I've seen about Generation Kill on YouTube primarily. It's talking about the realism of Generation Kill and how this is just as realistic as notably there were 2 other HBO shows, one that came out before this and one that came out after, about other war fronts. Do you want to take a guess at what they are?
Band of Brothers in the Pacific.
Yeah. Have you seen either?
Oh, of course. I've seen them both multiple times.
Okay.
So, yeah. Is it okay if I interject?
Yeah, go for it.
So the realism aspect of it is very major with Generation Kill. And I don't know if now is a good time to talk about it or if we want to touch on it later, but something right before we we went live, which I should have discussed with you earlier, was as you know, I did that brief stint in the Navy, right?
Indeed, you did.
Indeed, I did. Now, I dropped out of officer candidate school for a myriad of reasons, but I dropped out, and there was a period of time where I was in student pool waiting to process out. I was in student pool for about a month of my 3 month or month and a half of my 3 month time in the Navy, where basically I was collecting a check for doing menial labor around the base while I waited for the Navy to say, okay, get the fuck out of here, right? During that time, we watched Generation Kill, all of us in student pool. And student pool isn't just made up of people who are being processed out for a number of reasons, whether they dropped or they got attrited for lack of physical fitness or they got injured. But it's also people that are waiting to receive their commission after graduating from the program, which is being held up for one reason or another, whether it's they have to wait until their contract as an enlisted person ends, or they have to wait for security clearance to complete, or some sort of medical thing to finish processing through, whatever it may be, right? There were people there that were in student pool for like, I'm not kidding. There was one guy who's like a Hong Kong national who went through, got the clearance to go to training and completed training and all this stuff. And this poor dude was living in this like basically a college dorm room on a military base for a year and a half,
Oh,
and they denied his clearance to actually get his commission. And like all this dude wanted to do was just be a naval officer, you
damn,
know?
dude.
And he wasn't even going for anything, like he wasn't going for intelligence or anything. He was just regular like baseline security, or regular security clearance an officer would need.
Mhm.
And it's just like, dude, I'm so sorry. Not to get too off topic, but dude like mounted like a 65-inch TV in his dorm room and all this stuff. And gotten like real serious shit because he like basically just did all these crazy modifications to this room. He got fined for they had to take all this stuff down. He left student pool with like $15,000 worth of electronics that he had bought because while you're living there, you have no expenses. And he's collecting like, I think at that point it was either E6 or O1 paycheck. And so he's collecting like $30,000 to $40,000 a year, almost with no expenses. But sorry, all that's beside the point. It's a funny story. But we watched Generation Kill, and everybody liked the show. But the interesting thing was there was one fella who I can't remember his name, who was waiting on his commission, who was a prior enlisted Marine, and he, if I remember correctly, was he wasn't in the invasion of Iraq, but he was in the occupation around 2008. If I remember correctly, and there were a number of other people who were like attrited, but they were real gung ho patriot, like America, right? Military, fuck yeah. And they liked the show for its realism, but they didn't quite latch on to the cynicism of the whole thing that we'll get into in a bit later. They didn't latch on to, uh, to make a reference to another joke, war bad, planes rad, right? Or whatever it may be. Like they didn't latch on to the idea of like power dynamics or like the cost of life or the damage that was inflicted on the Iraqi people or anything like that. It was just about like how real it was about combat and like the glorious nature of combat and how hardcore it could be. They did talk a lot about like, stupid officers and stuff like that, which we'll get into. But like a lot of that, like maybe we're the baddies kind of stuff. Just no, didn't even think about it. And it's just wild how if you have a different mindset looking at a piece of media, you can come to a complete different conclusion. Like how conservatives used to really like the Colbert Report because they thought it was unironically a conservative talk show and he was owning the libs. You know. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there real quick because it's just an interesting story that it's in my memory regarding this show from a very strange time of my life.
Hell yeah. And the
Being a communist surrounded by a bunch of like retiring or active duty military personnel who are all rather right wing. It's like, so what do you think of the president, Zach? I think he's a piece of shit. Had fun conversations. Anyway,
You do bring up a good point about the realism thing. Is that's something that a lot of the guys that were in or depicted in the show, and if you look at the further resources at the bottom of the show notes, you'll see a link to an interview with the first recon Marines. Like, you know, these people liked Generation Kill because, in much the same way, like it showed off the realism, and more importantly to them, it like told their story, which, you know, crucify me, whatever, but like this is an important story, and like their stories are significant in the whole context of the war and whatnot.
right. Like a lot of people, I think there's so much focus on individual agency when people discuss the military, especially with enlisted folks. Like in when I was in officer training school or officer candidate school, a lot of the people that were there was a handful of people who were prior enlisted who really were like started from the bottom, working my way up on building a career because this is the path I took, right? And
Mhm.
then there were a lot of like, people, I come from a military family. My dad was an officer, his dad was an officer, I'm doing with a family thing,
Mhm.
like military aristocracy, right? But like a lot of people ignore the reality of a certain level of victimhood that I think a lot of people, and especially enlisted people, have in the military. And that their story is, I don't know if this is where you're going with it, but their story is valid. These are people who are often in an economic situation where their choices are going into debt with minimum wage, turning to crime,
Mhm.
or joining the military. And it's presented as a way out of poverty. And to be fair, it is generally a way out of poverty for a lot of people, assuming you don't get hurt and you can stay in long enough to build a career.
Mhm.
But a lot of these folks are lied to and brainwashed through training.
Mhm.
And there are, of course, people who are like, I want to go in to kill people, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
There's a lot of folks like that in the combat arms community. But I think a lot of people lose the plot of the fact that the vast majority of the military is working class. And even then, among enlisted people, a very significant section of the military are people of color.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
sorry if I'm going way off topic here.
No, you make it's a very valid point, and this was something that also we were talking about like while we were planning this is like.
Yeah, like that. There's a certain element of like I'm just following orders doesn't excuse you for the things that you've done.
Mhm.
But you can look at God. Who was the actress who was with the Manson family, who was kidnapped by them and like.
Jeez, I don't know.
But you know what I'm talking about. And she wound up like aiding them in like a bank robbery or something,
I
or maybe I'm thinking of like a different group in the 70s. But examples of that where like you join a group based on whatever information you've joined them with, right?
Mhm.
And there's a power dynamic where, like, if you're a private in the Marine Corps or something, or a corporal in the Army or whatever, and you're ordered to do something, like in theory, if it's an unethical order,
Mhm.
like you can deny or be insubordinate to that order, but then you wind up generally having a court martial where you have to prove that that order is unethical. And the
Mhm.
people that are making the decisions on whether or not that is unethical are the same people giving the large standing order.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so like that's my weird point is that like, I think we need to start looking at a lot of people in the military as much of victims as capitalism while simultaneously being the enforcers of it.
Yeah.
It I like you don't excuse the actions, but you can kind of in a way like
Yeah, it's just another form of exploitation. You're taking advantage of economic precarity while also exploiting like various levels of patriotism to get people on board with, for instance, invading Iraq. and
Committing war.
committing war crimes and all this sort of stuff. It's ridiculously perverse and something that definitely needs to be like talked about a lot more.
I think it's just one thing I just want to say. Like I see a lot in the left in general where it's like, well, we're a volunteer military. You volunteered for this,
Mhm.
right? But like the culture, the general overriding culture presented to your average working class American individual who would volunteer in the military, they don't view things from a critical eye. They don't, the
A
media
class
doesn't
perspective.
right. The media does not present like the American military as a tool of imperialism.
Mhm.
That's not the perspective they have. That's not the understanding that they have when they're signing up to join. Most of these people, and a lot in the leftist community, a lot of people view anybody who was a veteran or is a veteran or anything like that with a significant amount of mistrust
Mhm.
and the
Like
idea that they are like evil
like
for having
then
joined.
and that's something that you hear like within the first 10 minutes of the show, like when everyone's meeting Evan Wright, they're like, oh, what, you gonna go tell everyone we're baby killers? And yeah, there are some people out there that do view them as that, and I think this might get us a little crucified, but like, just fucking relax, dude. These people are
They're still people.
yeah, you can treat these people with some level of respect and whatnot.
Well, a funny thing you mentioned though, at the start of the show where he makes that comment to Evan, right?
Mhm.
That's part of the mindset that's trained into soldiers when they're going through indoctrination. That's what they call it. They call it the indoctrination phase of training. And it's a part of the overriding culture of the military, particularly amongst people who have not seen combat and not actually witnessed what happens in the wars the United States fights. Like don't trust the liberals, don't trust the media, don't trust the left. All these people are just out to get you. Like, oh, you're going to paint us as a bunch of baby killers. Like, like this idea. It's like cops' attitudes towards being holding the police accountable for their crime. You know, like, oh, I put on this uniform, so you're going to smear me only if you do something bad.
Yeah. I think that was a pretty good setup for like a lot of the outline of what we're trying to get at, and also just like the sales pitch that was used for this war was it was super patriotic. You know, we gotta go in there, we gotta punish Saddam for doing 9/11. Just it's gonna be Gulf War II, quick open and shut, 20-minute Rick and Morty adventure, or W and Cheney adventure. Come on, let's go. It'll be no problem. We'll get the WMD out.
Well, he's like Hitler. He's part of the axis of evil. Yeah.
Yeah. Never mind that Rumsfeld was pictured with him. Best fucking
he,
thing on the
he's
planet.
gassing the Kurds with chemical weapons we gave him.
He's using weapons that we definitely sold to him during the Iran-Iraq War in the 80s.
What do you mean he got sarin gas from the United States?
Where would he ever possibly come across that? Oh, another real quick fact. I learned this while I was helping out on another show that's adjacent to this, Cage Fight. We were reviewing The Rock, and what's interesting, part of the way that the WMD was described through the fake intelligence between 2001 and 2003 and the sales pitch for this war, apparently they got the description of the supposed chemical weapon missiles from The Rock.
Yeah, because the rocket's sarin gas.
Yeah.
Well, the reason is it's the most famous chemical weapon we've got because it's the one that we developed during the early Cold War to
Mhm.
use against like the Koreans and the Vietnamese and the Soviets.
Yeah.
It's little bomblets filled with nerve gas. It's an insane weapon. It's like, and we still have stockpiles of sarin gas. Like
Oh,
people don't realize this. The U.S. military has shitloads of nerve gas just sitting around.
mhm.
Anyway,
So now we're going to get into the main part of this analysis, the why are we doing this? And I said that a lot of the stuff that I've seen thus far on YouTube about Generation Kill focuses predominantly on the realism of it,
Mhm.
how it realistically portrays soldiers, officers, the bureaucracy of the military, whatever. But like like you said earlier regarding like seeing this at OCS, like we're coming at this from a completely different perspective. And the more and more I think about this show, the more and more I, and hopefully people who have seen the show, and you, dear listener, should you decide to go out and watch the show, which I'm sure the two of us would agree, you absolutely should. It is a fantastic show. This is a call to action. Go watch this show now. Fantastic. But it portrays, I think, more importantly, the way in which the campaign was broken from the start. And yeah, we can look on the campaign, the invasion, the occupation through not exactly rose tinted glasses, but we can look on it historically, be like, oh yeah, of course, obviously it was going to fail because of like, you know, certain reasons. But the things that you see in this 7-part show, this like 300-page book, you see these things that we would later come to find out being played out right in front of your faces.
Mhm.
And that's what we're going to do. And we've narrowed it down to like kind of 4 different ways in which the failure of the war, quote unquote failure of the war, and this is something that could warrant an entire discussion of like, was this planned to fail from the beginning, whatnot. There are definitely some things in the show that forecast and reflect the actual campaign of the invasion.
I think I appreciate most about Generation Kill is it gives a boots on the ground perspective
Yeah.
of things that we retroactively fully understand from a like bird's eye view.
Hmm.
Um, what I mean by that, right? Look at, for example, the stock value over 20 years of I think it's Lockheed Martin.
Probably. There are there are numerous military contractors that I could list off, which all probably have gone up since 2001 and 2003.
So Lockheed Martin's at its highest point now, but that really spiked after 2013 because I think they make the Predator drone.
Probably.
Um, but it's not Lockheed Martin, but there's a couple of different contractors and manufacturers of weapons for the United States military that right around 2003, like you said, their stock values skyrocket.
Hmm.
I I think the Iraq War was very successful.
Yeah, and
I
that's
think
part of the discussion.
yeah, I think that the Iraq War achieved everything that it wanted to be, which was a way to generate profit for a number of very large, very influential corporations.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And we see that in the show too. Like we talked about this a bit before recording, the scene where Iceman and his squad they think they got hit by some mortar fire or something, right?
Yeah, they were
From
watching the Hamlet.
they're watching the Hamlet and they've sketched out like the layout of the buildings. They're watching the people. They're actually getting kind of attached to the people there. And all of a sudden, it was Doc, right? The medic just runs up and is the corpsman is just like, hey, get down, guys, and then boom, you have an airstrike that just hits the Hamlet and just vaporizes
Hmm.
everyone there. And like the decision making there, like there's whole dynamics there about that we were thinking about with obedience to authority and like chain of command and maintaining control and all of that, maintaining control over your troops who may not be on board with such criminal activity.
Hmm.
But it's a key thing to think about, like the decision making there that we could scout this out, go and investigate, and move on, knowing full well that a lot of times the military or the Iraqi military and militias would use hit and run tactics. They'd fire and then they'd leave,
Hmm.
right? Versus just blow it up.
Hmm.
And how that decision is influenced by the mentality that the modern military has, that a weapon unused is a weapon wasted.
Mm-hmm.
In no small part because the way that our budgeting system for the Pentagon is that the Congress allocates a certain amount of funds to the military, and in that budget, it's mandated that they find ways to spend all that money in that calendar year.
Well, we have it. Might as well use it.
But that's an actual thing that people don't realize. It influences how we fight our wars, like in Iraq. When the Congress makes the annual military budget, right, for the Department of Defense, let's say it's $800 billion or whatever for that year, they're not saying we're giving you $800 billion that you can spend. And like maybe they could save it as a surplus or something, a rainy day fund in case World War III breaks out or whatever, right? They're giving them that $800 billion budget, and it says you are required to spend this entire budget this calendar year. However you want to do it, however you can do it, this money must be spent. You can even spend more if you want.
Damn. That I didn't realize. That's some psycho shit.
Yeah. That's part of the reason why when I went into the Navy, they were so hungry for pilots. Because that was what I was looking to do. I was looking to be a pilot, right? They were hungry for pilots because the Obama administration had downsized the military budget relatively, right? And so the Navy downsized the amount of pilots that they had on active duty. Well, when the budget got spiked up again under Donald Trump's presidency, guess what they're doing? Bringing on a shitload more pilots again. So they're out there pushing to find as many, people who are qualified to be pilots as possible, by hook or by crook. They'll lie to you about like for me, I told my guys like, hey, do I need to work on my running right now? And he's like, no, you can do like an elliptical for your PT. Oh, okay. Got there. Nope, everybody runs. I was like, oh, crap.
So
This
recruiter, are you telling me that I can get some good Thai pussy if I join the Air Force? Sure, son. You can even fight a giant dragon in a suit of armor. Why don't you?
Yeah. But like that, I don't mean to get off topic again, but
that's all you do on the show.
It's all I do on this show, but it ties into like the kind of things we see throughout the show, all these confusing decisions that were made in the Iraq War with shock and awe, and like the ways that the war was conducted. Like it could have been a careful invasion that was methodical, that ensured minimal collateral damage, sole focus of deposing the current leadership and fostering in a new leadership or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or it could be
a new non-broken leadership.
Right.
Not, like funded and puppeteered by the US. But
right.
Where's the fun in that?
Or it could be what it turned out to be, right?
Yeah.
Which was send in everything we've got in a chaotic mess, blow up as much stuff as you possibly can, use as much ordnance as you possibly can. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but get us back on track. I'm done derailing.
Time to play my role of herding cats.
Well, this is why when I was like, so is anybody else on for today? And you're like, no, it's just you and me. I was like, oh no, this is gonna become the Zach Ramble show.
Well, we're better for it, I guess.
I'm glad that you think so.
All right. So the first way that Generation Kill really shows us like forecasting and whatnot is at the beginning of the show, most notably through Ray. He's very clearly like,
Dear Frederick, thank you for your nice letter, but I am actually a U.S. Marine who was born to kill. Aruga. Whereas clearly you have mistaken me for some sort of wine-sipping communist dick suck. And although peace probably appeals to tree-loving bisexuals like you and your parents, I happen to be a death-dealing, blood-crazed warrior who wakes up every day just hoping for the chance to dismember my enemies and defile their civilizations. Peace sucks a hairy asshole, Freddy. War is the motherfucking answer.
And that is just incredibly indicative of like a lot of their attitudes in the battalion towards violence and how they're going to employ it in a very courageous and warrior-like fashion to, you know, smite my enemies and to do this war on the behalf of our countrymen and like fend off terrorists from our shores and stuff. And you see this also in like, because this is the only like other piece of war media that I can directly remember is Full Metal Jacket, you know? And much like in Full Metal Jacket, right before everyone steps off, the gunnery sergeant of the battalion, he's like, Marines, kill on 3, and he counts off 1, 2, 3, and everyone just shouts kill. And you know, let's go get some. Go Moto, boys.
Well, it's very much like the mentality. Well, especially with Force Recon. I mean, you know, First Reconnaissance Battalion, First Force Recon Company. They are, you know, a special operations capable unit. Like the Generation Kill is about a special forces.
Yeah,
and that's their whole thing is they go in and they figure out what's going on and then they kill it.
yeah.
That's their whole mission. Well, it's interesting you mentioned though about like the mentality of the different Marines depicted in the show, right?
Mhm.
With like Ray and a lot of the other guys who have not, I don't think, seen combat before the invasion of Iraq. Maybe Ray has. I don't recall, but I don't think Ray was in
Afghanistan.
yeah, in Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's something else to note is that a lot of these guys were in Afghanistan. Also, more importantly, I think, is a lot of these people depicted in the show were around our age. They were like 22 to 26.
Yeah, at most, or younger.
Yeah, when they invaded.
Right. Well, like Ray, the character of Ray, well, the person Ray, if I remember correctly, he he was not in Afghanistan, but he was very gung ho. A lot of the other guys who had not deployed in Afghanistan and hadn't deployed at any point before that in a combat, you know, situation were significantly more gung ho. Whereas you had characters like
Rudy and Pokey.
Rudy, Pokey, Michael Fick, the lieutenant. Michael Fick was a big one because he wasn't just in Afghanistan. I mean, he saw the shit really hit the fan in East Timor. He was actually deployed in the East Timor crisis in 1999, which everybody forgets about that whole absolute mess. It's like what 1,400 civilians or so were killed. Like it was just nuts, absolutely nuts. The East Timor crisis of '99, but like him, Iceman, and a lot of the senior NCOs and junior officers who not senior NCOs, regular NCOs like sergeants. Senior NCOs, they've been in forever. You know, this is their life, right? Like
the team leaders and stuff,
right?
The sergeants and stuff.
The team leaders, the platoon leaders, things like that. They were significantly more cynical about what they were about to do.
Cynical and also like more even keeled.
Right. This is our job.
Yeah, they weren't Ray or Trombley being like, "Oh, I can't wait to fucking shoot someone."
Right. Their whole mentality was like, you know, like, you know what, we got to do it. It's the mission. It's what we're being handed.
Yep.
You know, I signed a contract.
Yeah.
It's a living.
At least it beats a 9-to-5 job, pencil pushing. Am I right, boys?
But like but that dynamic, that difference, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna move on to the next thing about like Trombley and how he's always chomping at the bit to shoot someone, and before they get into some action, like the first big gunfight. Oh, that's something else that I forgot to mention. I heard this floated around, but Generation Kill isn't like your action blockbuster movie. It's essentially like a road trip where it's like long parts of just dry procedurals interspersed with like, you know, action of like gunfire and stuff.
Well, and even the action and the gunfire doesn't glamorize. It's very real to like what actual firefights are like.
Mm-hmm.
You don't
Yeah.
know who's shooting at you from where. You don't really know what you're shooting at. You don't know
Yeah.
if you really hit them. You just keep your head down and keep firing at where you think you're getting fired at from
Mhm.
until eventually the shooting stops.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that Trombley just really wants. Is he several times leading up to their first real engagement, he's just like, Sergeant, I didn't get to shoot anything. When the fuck am I gonna get to kill someone? And he's
Yeah. He wants to be an action hero.
yeah, he kind of does.
You know, he's seen too many war movies.
Yeah.
He wants to go and be a badass with a machine gun,
hmm
you know.
Yeah. And then he does finally get some, and he's like, "Oh fuck yeah, dude! Shot some guy in the knee, and I watched it explode. That was cool." Just that boy is a stone cold, dead-eyed killer. And
An
yeah,
interesting thing to see. Oh, go ahead. You
no,
may actually talking about that.
that's what I was gonna leave it off at.
I mean, it's interesting to note that about Trombley, right?
Mhm.
But as the show goes on, if I remember correct, Trombley isn't the same after that, though. He's a lot quieter
Yeah.
after that fight, where he actually gets to shoot someone and sees someone's knee explode.
hmm
He isn't as gung ho.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, makes you question if his, like, yeah, I finally got it, was more of a telling himself that was so awesome what had just happened and what he just did, like because he believes it, or if it's because if he doesn't, like, I just destroyed a person, you know?
hmm
I like, this sounded like such a badass thing to do until you do it and you saw that you did it to somebody.
Hmm.
That's an element of war that a lot of people don't talk about, especially, like, again, not to harp on a lot of the American left, but like when people, like, deride soldiers who have PTSD, like, oh, you get PTSD from doing all these horrible things. It's like, yeah,
Yes.
that's the leading cause of post-traumatic stress disorder is guys get amped up and brainwashed, sent into combat to fight an imperialist war, and they do things that are, whether or not they're technically legal by the rules of war and international law, even the things that are legal, they wind up doing things to people that
Mhm.
haunts them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. And that's
Because they're
go
sold
ahead.
a line of goods that it's so glorious and awesome to do something like this, but when you actually do it and you see the pain that you cause on another human being, unless you're a complete and total sociopath, that's
Like
going to stay
Trombley.
with you forever.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that Poke realizes very late in the show. I don't remember what they were doing exactly, but they were all just, it was like some quiet time, downtime in the show. And Poke was talking to like Iceman and Ray, and he's like, you do some of this shit back stateside, you go to fucking prison.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the whole realizing, like, maybe what we're doing here is a little
Criminal.
bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's crazy how widespread that impact is on people. I mean, like, I have a friend who was an artilleryman in Iraq in like 2012 to like 2014 or something was when he was deployed. And he was just in the National Guard, right? Like, he didn't sign up to go fight in the army. He signed up for
Mhm.
the National Guard. The National Guard is not supposed to be deployed outside of a situation of emergency,
Mhm.
right? We do it all the time anyway. But he didn't even shoot anybody with a gun or anything like that. But you ask him about what it was like or what did he experience? He's just shooting artillery. He doesn't talk about it.
Mhm.
He can't bring himself to talk about it because even if he doesn't know what he's done, he has the knowledge that I am lobbing large explosive shells into urban areas, and I have undoubtedly caused the deaths and maiming of innocent.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, he's a very different person from when he left. He's quieter. He was really gung ho back in high school. After coming back, he doesn't talk about it. He's a paramedic now, or actually, he's a registered nurse. Like,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, he was an artilleryman, and then after his first tour, the first thing he did was he like busted his ass to get reassigned as a medic instead. Just, you know,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't want to place an idea on somebody else's life, but I don't know if it's a certain act of attempting to redeem, you know, helping
Yeah.
people or healing people to make up for all the harm that you wound up causing or being a
Yeah.
part of. Not
Mhm.
causing, but being a part of. Sorry, I keep going on tangents.
No, it's good. We're doing great. It's
We're doing God's work.
we're posting. And by God, we're gonna keep posting.
You're doing it, Peter.
So, and you can also see ways in which the attitudes of killing changes. Very notably, in at the end of episode 5, like when they're going to do some ordnance disposal, which interestingly enough, the ordnance that they have to explode is in a school, and they're like, "Can't we just put this stuff out in the street?" And whatever. And they have a roadblock set up, and there's one driver that doesn't stop, and Walt accidentally shoots and kills the driver, and Iceman freaks out at him. He's like, "What the fuck? You're supposed to shoot to warn, not to kill." And then he like helps Walt go sit in the Humvee, and he's like, "It's okay." He kind of like talks him down from like his extremely heightened state of paranoia in that moment.
Mm-hmm. And guilt.
Yeah, exactly. And that whole, not only that instance, but other instances of the show of civilians getting killed is something that is just ridiculously common, especially in the early parts of the invasion and occupation. One thing that I continuously come back to is the Jimmy Massey interview, the Staff Sergeant Jimmy Massey interview with Democracy Now! In early 2004. And apparently he was like a little sensationalized with the story that he was telling, and there's some conflicting evidence of like he didn't do it as much as he said, but he still did it, which like, yeah, he still did it. It's bad. He should still talk about it. And he notes like, you just don't know who out there in this country is your enemy and who isn't. And, you know, cars would drive to our checkpoints and not stop, and we would fucking light them up. And we'd pull the bodies out of the cars afterwards, and we'd find nothing. And can't really say it's just something that happens, because it sounds like you're doing apologia for it, but like, this is something that happens, and something that happened in this war.
Yeah.
And the best way that this and everything else is shown, we'll get to that in a bit, because it's really encapsulating of the entire show. So next, do you have anything else about this little section about how people's attitudes towards killing changes and whatnot?
I mean, even Ray.
Yeah.
We started off with Ray, but we didn't even talk about how, you know, Ray was messed up by the end of the show.
Yeah. How like after they had like basically withdrawn from Baghdad and they were on the base, Ray was just super quiet, as opposed to every other point in the show where he can't stop talking.
Yeah, we pimp him.
That is still the picture of him with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth is still my background on my computer. I fucking love that picture.
It's such a good photo.
Real homie. So the next big way that the show tells us this hidden story about the war is regarding the ROE, the rules of engagement, and how the changing of the rules of engagement as seen through the show really led to a lot of bedlam and paranoia and like recognition of acceptable losses because of this paranoia in the ranks. And, you know, the first encounter of the show with armed Iraqis is in the first episode, where a bunch of who you come to find out are death squads roll up in white pickup trucks to where the Bravo company are stationed and holding a road, and they have like a Mexican standoff, and then they like wave the guys off. And the original rules of engagement were they could only fire upon armed and uniformed Iraqis. but there functionally were no uniforms throughout our entire occupation. Like, the enemy forces really never had uniforms. And that's something else that Jimmy Massey points out, is that the Fedayeen would put on civilian clothes. And because of that, but, you know, the rules of engagement changed then. And then it's like, oh, anyone that's armed is hostile. And then, you know, if someone is potentially spotting for a mortar team, an Iraqi mortar team, you can just shoot them whether or not they're armed or not. And then, you know, come episode 3, anyone that's on or near the airfield that we're going to invade is hostile, which leads to Trombley shooting a couple camels, and, as you come to find out, a small child, because of this rapidly changing rules of engagement. And rapidly is, you know, what does that mean? It's also important to note that this show takes place over like 40 days. It's a very quick time period. Like, the time between our initial invasion and mission accomplished was like barely more than a month and a half. It wasn't even 2 months.
Like a big part of the wars dynamic was there's a lot of awards and a lot of things that go into consideration for promotion boards for like officers and stuff. That it's much more beneficial for your career to have commanded or directed a unit through a combat situation like battle, where fire is exchanged, things like that, than it is to, you know, command it through an invasion or something where maybe combat doesn't take place. The Iraqi military wasn't really resisting us very hard.
Yeah.
They were in like almost a constant state of retreat.
And that's something that they say in the show, is that the enemy is always on the back foot.
Right. Well, because they're not really looking to challenge the United States military. I mean, the last time that they did, in 91, they got rolled.
Yeah. Even though that war too, like you have told me, it was very poorly managed and a shit show behind the scenes.
Oh yeah, on both sides. I think I mentioned to you before that there's this gigantic tank battle. Like, yeah, 50,000 military dead on the Iraqi side in Desert Storm in the span of a month, a week, and 4 days. I don't think that they really wanted to recreate that.
Yeah.
As military people. But like, I think I mentioned once in Desert Storm, there's this big famous tank battle that you know, American West is the best, American military is mightiest, most advanced in the world, like to jack themselves off about. A big tank battle between, you know, a bunch of M1 Abrams and a bunch of
T-72s.
T-72s, yeah. Which there were 3,300 tanks destroyed.
Jesus.
Iraqi tanks destroyed in the 91 war. There was this gigantic tank battle where a ton of Iraqi tanks got absolutely wiped. They were armed with dummy rounds, with training rounds. So like there was a snafu on the logistics on the Iraqi side. And there's been analysis that if they had been properly armed with high explosive anti-tank shells, like they should have been, with the way that our armored units rolled into this just big desert field where there were a bunch of T-72s, like 3/4 of the way buried into the ground, with just the turrets poking out, we would have had insane loss of material and personnel. Absolutely insane. Like it probably would have dragged the war out for like at least a few more weeks. Yeah, it's all been a shit show. But like there's so much eagerness in shown in Generation Kill and in the actual war in 2003 of glory seeking. I mean, Godfather encapsulates that perfectly. You know, he's even got quotes about it where he's like, you know, I have this nightmare that one day Fernando is gonna do something that General Mattis doesn't like. You know?
Yeah.
It's all about his career.
And that's certainly something that we can hit on in the last section, because that's
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. But yeah,
we'll get it in post.
Yeah. The rules of engagement change very regularly, and it is very likely that it's that constant changing and that paranoia that led to a significant portion of innocent civilian deaths. And there's one point in the show, I think, where Godfather says, like, we're killing too many civilians. That's not good. And I think Lieutenant Nate Fick also says that, where he's like, we don't want to kill too many civilians because that would turn all of Iraq against us, and we don't want that because that would ruin like any chances we have at this being a smooth war and stuff. And spoiler alert, can't imagine what happened there. And
wow, it was not a smooth war.
very bumpy. Don't like it. And even at other points in the show, it's interesting. In episode 6 of the show, Poke later says that he's all for shooting like every Iraqi within 100 meters of them, which is like, there's so much stuff that could be said about that. Like, just so many brain worms, just paranoia, all sorts of just nutty shit that would lead someone to think, I want to like shoot everyone that comes close to us.
Well, it wasn't a conventional war from the start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From the word jump, it was an insurgent.
Yeah.
Because
which is something that our upper command did not want to acknowledge. Even until like 2007, they didn't want to say that this was an insurgency.
Mm-hmm. Like the Iraqi army proper surrendered en masse pretty quick.
Anything else you got for this section? The rules of engagement section, I feel, was pretty quick. Like, it changed a lot, and that caused a lot of paranoia and issues. I don't think there's really much else to say about that.
Cock hard, head empty. What, this topic doesn't make you Randy too?
No, I can't say it does.
Don't keep that in.
I will cut out everything except where you say don't keep that in or whatever. So the next big way in which we see how Generation Kill is forecasting the broader quote-unquote failure, the mishap, the bungling that was the 2003 invasion, was, I think, probably one of the most notable things, at least back here in the States too. Granted, I'm barely 25. I was young as fuck when this war started, so I have no idea what the popular opinion on this was. And we kind of talked about this too earlier, is that the original idea of the war was to be this spreading peace and democracy, kicking out Saddam, helping all these people. That's what we're going to go in there and do. We're going to fight the war, we're going to win, then we're going to help everyone.
Well, that's a tale as old as time.
Yeah. And
that
that's
was
just
the
like
idea that was the idea in Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, it was.
No, like I'm not kidding. Like, I mean, later in the war in Vietnam, like there was the draft and stuff that got kicked in. But early on, the first few years of our involvement, the idea was, I'm doing this to help the Vietnamese. It's a noble cause, We're going to go and fight off the communists and preserve freedom for Vietnamese people.
Yeah, and that is something that a lot of these Marines, I'm sure, believed. And let's just talk about that a little bit. Probably one of the first really good instances that they all recognize that we aren't necessarily here to help everyone is right at the end of the first episode, where they encounter a large group of, I think it was mostly, if not all, men who were like walking along a railroad track, and they say that they were like fleeing the Fedayeen, who have white pickup trucks with red diamonds on them. Who did we see like 20 minutes earlier in the episode? And they were all fleeing these death squads, and Doc and I think Nate and Iceman were like, we have to help these people. And then it was like Encino Man or someone comes along and is like, nope, can't do that. We gotta keep moving, send these people back. And Doc is like, no, dude, under the Geneva Convention, we have to help these people. And he's like, nope, sorry, we gotta move. And they are forced to send all these men, these like 100 men or so, back towards the Fedayeen death squads. And I'm sure that like was a very good tip off for them of like, maybe we aren't here to help them. And then moving on to the airfield invasion block of an episode where Trombley ends up zipping the kid just randomly, pretty much. Doc gets really pissed about it, and he's like, we got to take this kid to Godfather and make him like Casavac this kid to get him some help. At which point Godfather's like, yeah, under the rules of engagement, we have to give this kid as much medical treatment as he would get here otherwise, which is 0. And everyone is like absolutely not happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
And another interesting thing that I didn't have allocated here, but I distinctly remember from the show, was after, you remember the scene where, or the segment where they have to like take a bridge, but they don't end up crossing it, and Ray gets all pissed off because no one can back up. The day after that, when they're out observing everything, they're like turning through dead bodies of Iraqis, and Mish, the company translator, he takes a look at someone's body and he finds a passport, and he's like, oh yeah, look at this. This guy was a student from Syria or Jordan or whatever. And he's like, he got a stamp on the 30th of March to come to Iraq with his stated purpose was jihad. And he's like, that is some wicked shit, dude. And like, if you are drawing students from other countries into this war only like 5 or so days after it starts, like that should set off some red flags about what you're doing. But it might have for Godfather, certainly not for Mattis, I don't think. But like, they didn't radically change the way that they operated, and they couldn't, because this war was never about helping people. It was a blitzkrieg, crush Saddam, punish the country, etc. And we can also really see that in, I think, one of the absolute best illustrations of this in the final episode, where Nate takes some groups of guys, including Doc, out to, survey a neighborhood. Like, what do you guys need? What do you want? What can we do for you? And he gets a list of stuff like, they want clean water, they want medical help, they want drugs to help them sleep, etc. They want jobs. And cool, yeah, we'll work on that. We'll come back to you tomorrow. And then Encino Man or someone comes up and he's like, all right, Nate, we need you to go to this other neighborhood tomorrow. And Nate realizes, like, wait a minute, this isn't how you help people. We're just going to be skipping around and not actually like doing anything.
Mm-hmm. And that was really common, is that no unit in the initial occupation, would stick around one area long enough to actually build a rapport or provide support to the local populace. And it was really common. Let's say, your unit goes and talks to the leaders of a neighborhood. If they a lot of them would cooperate with the Americans at the start, because genuinely these folks didn't know, like, is this going to be better? Like, Saddam's out. Saddam was a really shitty person. We can't mince words there. Like,
they say they want 2 things: jobs and statues of George Bush.
Yeah, but like, like a lot of these people like genuinely thought like, oh, maybe the U.S. is in charge now or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they cooperate because this is the new government, basically the new people in charge. And then our units would leave those neighborhoods after getting what they want or their grievances or whatever on paper, and then not come back for a while. And the remnants of the Fedayeen and other Ba'athist groups would go in and kill anybody who collaborated with the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All trust gone.
Yeah.
We're not going to cooperate with you because you just leave, and then we're dead.
Yeah. And exactly. And that's a lot of you see that a lot of other places in not only the Iraq War, but also over in Afghanistan in parallel. is like we created a lot of our own enemies, not only through the accidental murdering of civilians and whatnot, but like shit like this. And this is part of the thing known as blowback. And aside, if you are wanting to know a lot more about this war, the first season of Blowback is incredible. It's 10 episodes, about an hour long each, just ridiculously comprehensive catalog of the lead up to the invasion and like the years after it and what ended up happening. Just obscenely good show. Please go listen to it. Whether intentionally or not, we create our own new enemies. And this is something that I've been tossing around in my head. Like, was it deliberate that we fucked up, that we intentionally moved everyone around? Like, was this something that the brass in the DoD had in mind as part of like their class consciousness of like, we need this war to go poorly? I don't know. I haven't come to a decision on that, but it's all but said that that was their intention and all but completely shown. I guess it's kind of like what George Carlin said once, there doesn't need to be a formal conspiracy and a formal event for a conspiracy to arise. And, maybe that's my lifelong conspiracy, is that they intentionally fucked this up.
Even if they didn't care if they did.
Yeah.
Because they accomplished the main goals, which were to blow a lot of stuff up and to get political capital based off of the American people's outrage over the 9/11 attack.
Yeah.
We're doing something. We're getting revenge.
We're punishing the people who did this. Hot psych.
Right. Exactly.
Got to get all that Iraqi gold, because that'll certainly that'll avenge the several thousand people that died on 9/11. Most certainly. Source, trust me, dude. You got anything else about the changing objectives and the realization they're not there to help people?
I'm all set, homie.
All right, now on to the fourth and final section of how Generation Kill kind of forecasts the end of this war for us, or the future of this war, is really hammering home on the very rigid power dynamic among all the soldiers themselves, and also like the commanding officers and whatnot, but also from the political leadership of the US to the military. And you were the one that in when I was creating the outline, you were like the one that really created this section. So like, what exactly did you mean when you elucidated the points of the power dynamics and stuff? Because we kind of touched on this earlier, but didn't fully get there.
Like I said before, if you're a regular soldier, you are beholden to the orders that are given to you by your NCO, your non-commissioned officer, who's beholden to the orders that's given to them by their officer, who's beholden to orders to them by their superior, and it just goes up the chain. And the orders get vaguer and vaguer as you go up the chain of command, to the point where it's just like, take that city, right? And the chain of command is often circumvented by like lower level senior officers, like colonels or captains. They'll just make decisions and do things like calling in an airstrike when you don't need to, or which ties into where I was saying, there's awards that you get for being in certain situations that if they're not happening, ambitious career-minded individuals will manufacture that event. Like calling in a danger close airstrike you don't need to call in. Right?
Yeah, that
But as a regular soldier, you have the recourse and the supposed responsibility or obligation, according to the morals and ethics that are taught to you in basic training, to be insubordinate if you are given an order or a command that is criminal in nature. Right? That's a responsibility. They tell all soldiers you have that responsibility. disobey an unjust order.
Mhm.
But then you have to. It's like having an open door policy at work for grievance. Do you kind of get what I'm getting at with that?
Not exactly.
So,
And even if I did, I'd want you to explain it anyways.
there's a lot of employers that have their system for grievances from employees regarding situations at work. They say, I have an open door policy. So if you have a problem at work, especially if you have a problem with leadership, you have to go in yourself, be identifiable as an individual, and individually voice that grievance with someone who has a power dynamic over you. Are you going to make that complaint?
That makes a lot of sense.
Are you going to challenge that authority? In a military situation, if one person is insubordinate, they can be court-martialed and given a discharge because it would be based off testimony of other people there. If a group of soldiers is insubordinate, that could be considered mutiny. That's potentially a capital offense. There's this double speak of resist an unjust order, and also there was a cadence that they taught at OCS. It was discipline, discipline. Discipline is discipline is God, I haven't said this in so long. Discipline, discipline. Discipline is the instant willing obedience to orders, respect for authority, and self-reliant. So the instant willing obedience to orders, respect for authority, and self-reliance. So it's a double speak that you are both responsible for your own actions, but you are to be, instantly obedient and respect authority. So if someone in a position of authority tells you to do something that you think is wrong, you're told that you're both responsible to make that judgment call as a regular ass soldier, a kid out of high school, but also respect authority.
Yeah. It's an extreme contradiction.
Right. And so there's that power dynamic between enlisted men and their NCOs, and NCOs and their officers, and junior officers and senior officers. That whole dynamic is there. But even beyond that, when you get to the level of senior officers, you start having their responsibility or their obedience to political authority. People have this image of the United States military as like, this honorable institution that has its own sort of culture and its own authority and all these sort of things. And it does to a certain extent. But they have this image based off of something like World War II, right? Where yes, Churchill and Eisenhower and Stalin, they give their broad orders of like, we need to defeat these guys, but the people who ran the show were like Eisenhower or Douglas MacArthur or, Montgomery or Patton or whoever, right? They made the decisions about how the war was actually fought. In the modern realm, that's not quite as true, right? The Joint Chiefs of Staff has become a very political institution, very closely tied with the policy decisions of whoever that happens to be the Secretary of Defense at the time, who is Rudy Giuliani. Not Rudy Giuliani. Could you imagine if Rudy Giuliani was the Secretary of Defense? No, fucking Donald Rumsfeld. I'm sorry. They're both ghouls, so
Yeah.
But Donald Rumsfeld at the time. So the policy decisions of the Bush administration and Donald Rumsfeld directly impact the decision making of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which directly impacts the strategic decision making of the generals that were in charge of the theater, which directly impacted generals who were in charge of campaigns within the theater, which directly impacts the decision making of the colonels, lieutenant colonels, majors, captains, etc., straight down the line, based off of political decision making, not necessarily strategic or tactical. The tactics are made to fit with the strategy, and the strategy is made to fit a political goal. And because the United States military, and I'm not advocating for a military that is not beholden to a political institution, I want to make that clear. That's a very dangerous situation to have, right? You don't want an entirely independent military.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely want them to be responsible to a civilian authority. But in this situation, they were responsible to what you could very easily say is a malicious political authority, civilian authority,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
and they were responsible to a civilian authority that had very close ties to defense contract
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and weapons manufacturing, and
And
had a vested interest in constructing what a lot of them called their project for a new American century.
yeah, buddy.
Every decision made straight down the line in that way trickled down into all the little snafus that you see throughout the show and you hear about from veterans and all
Mm-hmm.
these things where you think, how could you logically make that decision, do things that way?
Mm-hmm.
It's because the decisions weren't being made in a military minded way, they're made in a politically minded way. You
Mm-hmm.
see that in the scene on the bridge with General Mattis and the two colonels, Godfather and the other guy. I can't remember his name,
The guy who
but
gets shit canned.
the guy who gets shit canned. It's funny, the guy who gets shit canned, whose name I can't remember. I could look it up, but I'm not going to. You could look him up. Look him
I
up.
could.
But I know about him. He was widely regarded as one of the best senior officers below the rank of general in the Marine Corps. Soldiers loved him. His
Mhm.
main thing always was, I'm not going to put my guys into harm's way if they don't need to be. I'm not, we're not going to do anything that would cause harm to the civilian population if we don't need to do it. Right?
Mhm.
And so the whole situation on that bridge where Mattis is like, you're not just standing on your own dick, you're standing on my dick, right?
Mhm.
All he was doing was gaining intelligence on the situation in that city and doing some reconnoitering or some recon before rolling in. Because he didn't want to send a whole column into a densely populated urban area in the age of warfare where people have shoulder mounted rocket launchers like they're
Mhm.
candy.
Yeah.
But Mattis has the political directive that this is a shock and awe campaign. This is a blitzkrieg. We are blasting through.
Mhm.
Get across that bridge.
Yeah.
Godfather, being a politically minded officer, whether you want to say that he was redirecting Mattis so that Mattis wasn't so upset at this other colonel, or if he was maneuvering to be Mattis' favorite, could be one or the other, could be both.
That is maneuver warfare.
Yeah. But Godfather goes and he says, if you look down there, you'll see my, whatever company taking out their forward spotters. Right? So it could be a two-ended thing. He's redirecting Mattis away from being pissed off at this other colonel for doing something that's very reasonable within the certain acceptable range of caution that isn't insubordination, though Mattis did perceive it as insubordination. And also showing, hey, I'm resourceful, I'm following the orders to the T, and we're going above and beyond. And a big part of that is because Mattis is getting political pressure from his chain of command to move through that town as quickly as possible. And so, with the amount of pressure going on him to do this as quickly as possible, even if it's perfectly reasonable for this colonel to want to wait before going to this town to get a little bit more information, Mattis is viewing it as insubordination. Because if he doesn't get this done on the timetable that's been handed to him, he's going to get a lot of questions about why this wasn't done in the timetable that's given to him from the political element of the Department of Defense.
Which could potentially cost him his job.
Yes. Like he
Which-
probably wouldn't get shit canned, but he'd probably be taken off of being a combat jet. He's always been a combat jet. He always was.
It's really interesting and incredibly important that you bring up, which I shockingly didn't think about, is that you start at the top of the food chain with the White House, the Pentagon, etc., where it's acting on political orders. And then the more and more you get down the chain to people that are like riding in these Humvees, is you can't be political. Like the military, active duty, there's no spot for politics. And what ends up happening is exactly what we've been talking about. You get soldiers that cannot question these orders because, you'll get court-martialed or you'll get tried for mutiny and stuff.
Or at
And
the very least, you'll be put on shit details or passed over for promotions or
Mhm.
whatever extrajudicial sort of punishments that you can receive, which are common.
yeah,
There's
or
plenty of like sort of backhanded, sly, side eye kind of punishments that are given out to soldiers and
Mhm.
sailors and airmen that are not necessarily through the Uniform Code of Military Justice,
Mhm.
as much as like a lot of the legal core of the United States military would like to eliminate those extrajudicial things. It happens quite frequently.
And now just thinking about it, like, even like if you are a soldier that is political and voices their political opinions,
Apologies, real quick. I want to correct myself so that you don't get somebody saying, "Oh, that's wrong. That's wrong, Zach." No, I'm wrong. Actually, non-judicial punishment is sanctioned and exceedingly common for actual or perceived misconduct. Without requiring a court martial, which can include arresting quarters or restricted limits or all sorts of things. So, anyway, carry on.
but yeah, we know what happens specifically in the Iraq War when soldiers are political and they question the ethics openly of like, what the fuck are we doing here? We're here for oil. Like, this is stupid and pointless. We're doing genocide. You get a Pat Tillman, a really like cool guy who like risked his life, his football career to join the military, found out, oh wow, this is fucked up. We need to stop. And you get killed by friendly fire. Like
Mhm.
that's what happens in an apparatus like this when you question the motivations of the war.
Yeah.
And that will only lead to more and more fuck ups is the only thing I can say. Well, no, Godfather talks about this at the end of the show about Captain America. He's like, if you let him act unchecked, that's how you get another My Lai. It's like, that's exactly what happened in the Iraq War. Like, it is because they were probably very political in certain ways, but like, Blackwater, they killed civilians and they got pardoned by Donald Trump for what they did. Like,
Mhm. It's a political job in nature. You're enforcing the political will of the current administration.
mhm. It's much the same with police officers domestically. Like, you may not actively do political or like sociological things while you're on duty or at home, but like your role as an armed functionary of the state, you are serving an explicitly political purpose of protecting property rights from the unwashed masses. I don't know why I just pulled that phrase out of nowhere.
Well, no, I mean, there's a lot of doublethink
Mhm.
in military indoctrination. They hammer it home. You're not loyal to the administration that's in charge. You're not loyal to the government. According to military training, your loyalty is to the Constitution of the United States of America.
Mhm.
The document, the idea, concept of upholding that Constitution and defending it from all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Mhm.
But in actuality, the orders that come down from on high are almost always not about the Constitution of the United States or defending it or anything like that. It's enacting the political will of the administration in charge.
Mhm. And the
S-
ruling class at large.
Right. So these soldiers, these troops are given contradictory information. It's doublethink.
Damn, that section was really good. I'm really glad that you brought all that up. Like, that's some good brain food to let stew in your brain toaster. God damn.
I mean, you were just like, hey, man, what do you think about this? I'm like, hey, I'll tell you what I think about it. I want to be clear, too. These are things that are like opinions of mine based off of just observations that I've made in the span of my 26, 27 years. I'm not citing a study. I'm not claiming to be an authority, right?
Mhm.
Like, I don't want somebody to go, what you said is not 100% factually correct, right? And that's part of the reason why I kind of backtracked on NJP, non-judicial punishment. But yeah, you can say it's conjecture, but it's a reality that a lot of people see, you know? And I think it's part of the reason why we see so many veterans come back mentally absolutely fucked up. Even if they don't necessarily encounter anything that traumatic as events, individual events in their fighting, just the knowledge of their participation in something that is arguably evil time messes you up.
Yeah. So I guess, do you have anything else to say? Otherwise, we can kind of like wrap it up.
Have you seen there's an interview with with Iceman's team and Evan Wright, like sitting around talking about the show
Hmm.
some years later. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I watched it earlier, and I have it linked down below. It's the interview with the first recon Marines.
Did you notice just the mannerisms of almost everyone there though?
In what way?
All of them were uncomfortable.
Yeah,
They dealt with that discomfort in different ways.
I could kind of see that. Yeah.
But like all of I mean, you should really watch more of Iceman's video. He has his own like YouTube videos and stuff.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them.
He had one where he talked about leaving the military, right? He said like, you have like 11 weeks or whatever, or 9 weeks, can't remember, to make you into a warrior, right? Get you into the military, get you into the military mindset, out of the civilian mindset. And when you process out of the military, it's like a couple days.
Hmm.
They just throw you back into it, into the civilian world. And while you're in the military, especially in a combat setting, it becomes this new normal of just high stress, traumatic experiences over and over and over and over and over again. And then you go back into the civilian world, and that's when you break because now you have the time to reflect on everything you just experienced. And there's nobody there really helping guide you through that transition.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, which is why expanding the VA and whatnot, giving actual care to these retired soldiers and officers is just obscenely important. Like, and that's one really ridiculous thing
We're
about
delving into territory that will get us like absolutely shredded
yeah.
in leftist circles.
Yeah. This
But
this is
I
speculation.
I have a lot of sympathy for veterans.
Yeah. It's a
I've
weird and sort of hard thing to say in our shoes, but like, yeah, you
I
need to have some sympathy with these people.
people who are coerced into and lied to, not all of them, right? But a large
Mhm.
number are coerced and lied to by the systems and machinations of capitalism and our imperialist government to commit acts of evil, and then suffering from the reality of the things that they've done or been complicit in, and receiving no support from the very same people that coerced and manipulated them into that sort of behavior and action.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my last little thing I would just say on the topic. I mean, even somebody like, a lot of people like go, fuck that guy. Chris Kyle.
Yeah.
Did he kill a lot of people? Yeah.
He fucking did.
Did it mess him up? Yeah.
Absolutely.
That dude was messed up by the things that he did. No matter how justified he thought in the moment while he was, over there as a Navy SEAL, as a sniper, like, no matter how much convictions or politically messed up he may have been, if you think that, or want to think that he just had a really Like he went down a route of doubling down on justifying the things that he did to deal with it. It's tragic. I don't know. I
It's a hard thing to
it's
talk about.
it's difficult. You don't excuse the actions, but like I can look at somebody who's done something evil through acts of manipulation or coercion and feel pity. You can cut this out if it delves too much into like, you know, but
No, I think this stuff is important. It's important to
I mean,
'cause
I almost joined the military while actively like, I'm sitting around reading Lenin
Mhm.
and preparing to go to officer candidate school for the Navy, with my internal justification being, "Oh, I'll go fly heavies, I'll fly transport planes or something." It's just a career. It's a way that I can build some like clout and maybe I can get into politics and change or work through some reform or have military experience that would be beneficial in the sort of situation of the proles being fed up finally. You
Mhm.
know, those were all these justifications that are going through my head, these internal contradictions. And I think luckily my moral objections won out.
Mhm.
And it was part of the reason why I dropped. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
No, it does. It does.
Maybe
And
that's why I have a bit more sympathy for veterans.
mhm.
Is I can empathize and understand that them as people making the decisions that it may not be from a position of malice.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. And I guess the final thing that I'll say is like Republicans are pretty much the only people in the United States that will use the military as any sort of a political weapon. Like, don't you care about the troops? We got to support the troops. And then they do literally nothing.
Well, and they
And
always conflate the conflict with support for the troops. If you don't
yeah,
support the conflict, you don't support the troops.
yeah.
Nonsense.
And they do that sort of conflation all the time with like, criticizing the military with hating the country, etc. A whole bunch of awful just bullshit.
Right. If you criticize the institution, you have hatred in your hearts for the individual men and women.
Yeah. And I think that we do need to like, and I kind of am saying this from someone that I wanted to talk to for the show, but I unfortunately don't think he's here anymore. But he was a an army veteran in Vietnam, and he got sprayed and betrayed, and like he got diabetes from Agent Orange exposure, and like I think as a leftist, like these are people that we need to talk to. Like these people have direct experience with the just disgusting genocidal machinations. They went in there with some semblance of patriotic duty, and then they get used and thrown to the side. And I think that there is a lot of ripe potential in these people for de-radicalizing, whatever. Like getting these people to recognize like this is how it is going to be and this is how it has to be with normal people that you would elect in this country. Like we're at least people who want to somewhat change this and recognize you guys in various ways for your service in some ways. But there's definitely a whole big conversation to be had about how leftists can support people in the military, and I don't I think that's a totally different conversation for a totally different time. But
Or at least support them in coming out of it and reintegrating with society.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
it's a very valuable group of people to have on
On
your
your side.
side.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
antagonizing them isn't really a very wise decision.
Yeah. Do you have any other things to say about the show before I give like the encapsulating moment of the show that kind of sums it all up and lead
God, it
us
was a
out?
really cool show.
Yeah, it absolutely was.
Well done, home box office. I will name my first child after your executive office.
So thank everyone for listening, and I'll lead you out here with what I think and what I think Zach would agree is like the total the the ribbon on the present. Generation Kill as a gift is to us. The show ends in the final scene with all of First Recon, or like Bravo Company, getting ready to go home. They're all like last day in the country. They all have just really shitty booze in plastic cups. They're all just hanging out like, hey man, we did it. We finished our tour. We're done with this war. And one of the Marines, Lily, I'm pretty sure it was Lily. He was just randomly recording things throughout the show, and you can see him doing that. And he snipped it all together in one short little video. And all the Marines gather around like, yeah, all right, guys, let's see this. Let's reminisce. Let's think about the good times. Let's recount all these crazy memories that we made on this wild road trip together. And Lily hits play on his laptop, and the video starts playing of the Marines, and you start to hear Johnny Cash's song, The Man Comes Around, just starting to build up on the guitar coming in. And as the video goes, you see Marines starting with like Ray, like just peeling off and just like stopping watching the movie. And all the Marines that are there just like, yeah, what, like watching shit get blown up and whatnot. And interspersed in there are some of the more violently explicit parts of the show, like someone with their legs blown off or a dead child on the side of the road. And a lot of that gung-ho, yeah, Moto, get some, starts wearing off. And slowly more and more Marines peel off in silence, in disgust, some you could argue have on their face. And slowly the crowd watching the video just whittles away. And the last person you see as the man comes around ends and the video ends is Trombley. And the guy who was always so ready and jazzed up to go shoot people and kill people. He's standing there with a very stern look on his face, just probably recognizing what has just transpired. And he very sternly and forcefully grabs his gun and he walks off. As Johnny Cash says, and among the crowd, I saw a pale horse, and his name was Death, and hell followed behind him. And I think that moment is just the most heavy thing in this show, and perfectly sums it up, and is a great end to the show, and a great end to this discussion. And again, thank you all for listening. Thank you, Zach, for coming on and helping me out with this. Great having you on.
You keep bringing me onto your show to just ramble endlessly. I must be saying something right.
Say enough stuff, maybe something will stick eventually.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. See y'all later.